Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney, and it's good to be with you. Today we have a special client edition of the Hot Seat. Matt Rhoads is here with us, former owner of Central Pennsylvania Transportation. Matt, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Good morning.
Before we kind of heat things up a little bit, why don't you just take 30 seconds a little bit and just tell us about your background and just your position there with Titan and how you got into this current situation.
We were just a mid-sized regional truckload carrier. My father founded in 1985 with 3 trucks and just a second mortgage on our house and a little bit of savings. I grew up in the business, moved away out of college. My father had double-digit growth for the first 15 years of the business. I came back in the fall of 2000. He started transitioning out in 2005. And we did it. Our succession plan got derailed by the recession. But we ultimately decided to explore a sale earlier last year for a number of different factors. And it's been a good transition. We grew the business to just around 100 trucks based in Lancaster, PA, but servicing the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic area.
Well, thank you for that little bit of background. So let's jump right in here. And so you and I talked about, it's just really interesting hearing about these stories, about your experience from your vantage point. That's one of the things that we want to share with our audience this afternoon. So one of the things I want to go back here, family business, your second generation. What were the things that you were considering over the last year or two as it became clear that maybe a change was necessary?
A year ago at this time, I didn't set out to sell the business. I was initially going to continue. Most of my staff was 8 to 10, maybe 12 years older than me. So I was going to give it another 5 to 8 years and try and wind things down when they were closer to retirement. But as I looked at the year and, I looked at an imminent retirement of my CFO, I knew the fleet value was high. One thing that kept me up at nights was the risk of nuclear lawsuits. We're still involved in one, I would call it a frivolous lawsuit in Philadelphia, in excess of $10 million, where we really did nothing wrong. But all those factors, when I listed every reason to explore a sale versus remaining, it just really, there were fewer reasons to remain in the business and many more to exit. But in fact, my accountant, who we're very close with, kind of laid it out to me. He said, hey, even if you don't do it now, Matt, at least explore it. And that's what kind of led me to you.
I think that's pretty good counsel right there. Now, you could have hired anybody, and you mentioned you went to your accountant, you started getting input. Who else did you loop into your decision about who I should be hiring?
Well, I struggled with it for a little bit, and frankly, I found you guys through KSM in Indianapolis. We took part in a benchmarking exercise through our software provider, McLeod, and knew them, read some of their journals over the years, and reached out. And the advice I got was reach out to Spencer Tenney, and the rest is history. It worked out very well.
Very well. Well, and we're going to unpack that a little bit in terms of what that looked like. So, what were some of the things? This is your first business sale, is that correct?
That's correct.
So, what were some of the things that you experienced that maybe you didn't expect along the way that maybe surprised you?
Well, frankly, I was quite surprised. Our process went relatively fast, as you know. I was kind of surprised the first visit we had, how quickly an offer came. And I kind of felt like they really didn't spend a lot of time here at the facility seeing our operation in depth, but they liked what they saw and they made a pretty strong offer out of the gates, really just in the exchange of information and one brief lunch visit. So that surprised me. So, I had to force myself to be patient at many steps through the process and let things, you guys, you had a deep staff and many folks involved, but I kind of had to let you guys guide me and say, hey, that's not important at this stage of the game. We'll get there. Just be patient. So that It happened fast, but in many ways, it's the biggest transaction of my life. So was totally new territory for me.
So, that being said, maybe what's one or two pieces of advice that you would give to someone who's kind of similar size and shape? Let's just for context, about how many trucks was Central or was CPT operating at the point of transaction?
We had about, 70 company trucks and about 30, 35 owner operators. Pretty heavy in the trailers. I think we had about 550 trailers, two locations. Um, the old advice is to run your business as if you're going to sell it at any point in time. My CFO really prided himself on the organization. In fact, the buyer said we had the cleanest balance sheet they've seen. Um, the exchange of information, you guys told us at the onset, was a whole new job. It's going to be a full-time job for you, and it really was. But many times we get a list of 10, 12 things that we had to exchange, and my CFO prided himself in doing that within the next. Oftentimes he had it the next morning. So from our equipment listing, from our books to just the organization within the business, it just. I think it's one of the reasons our sale process happened so fast is we had our ducks in a row, and everything was clean.
I love that message that's coming through. Like we're good at what we do, but quite honestly, without that level of organization and speed and support, it limits what we can do for you. So I think that I hope that our audience hears what you just said from a preparation standpoint, because that's the surest way. If you've seen any of our seminars, that you can directly impact the way the way that you experience your own business transition. So that's great color. So. Stepping away from it, we're 6 months roughly away from the transaction. What are you doing right now?
So right, I'm in a transition period. The first weeks, the first 2 months really was about not just working with the customers, but in large part keeping the employees comfortable, making them at ease, working through the transition, keeping everybody on board. It's transition now. In the last year to date, I've been focused mostly on the customer side, contracts, rates, just transitioning customers over. They've talked to me about staying on in that sort of role, so we're still kind of figuring out that where it makes sense, where they see me. But we'll see. I'm in a good place.
Mm. Well, that's good to hear. And I think that is a concern, or not a concern. It's just maybe a little angst about what does that look like after I sell my business. What's going to be required of me from a support standpoint? What would you share with other folks that kind of have some questions or even hesitation about selling because of the uncertainty of what their life looks like after a sale?
Well, foremost, everyone talks about the culture, of a buyer and making sure the cultures match. But, one thing I took for granted is, we had quite a few employees that I feel they were kind of maybe more loyal to me, and wanted to work for a small company. And I took that for granted. So it was kind of impossible to ask, from a seller perspective, to ask every single question up front. I felt good about our buyer and what they were. They one of the things they told me at the onset I really liked was, we don't tell our employees or folks we don't treat them like family because we know dysfunctional families, but we like to treat people like we want to be treated, and that meant a lot to me. But yeah, so number one is culture. But again, it was just impossible to ask every scenario up front as to how things would look in the operation post sale. We did the best we could, and we did lose a few employees, and that hurt me a little bit because I guess I was probably a little naive. I thought everyone would give them a chance and everyone would be happy in 2022. But we did lose a handful of employees through the transition.
Well, I think just in terms of context, if we look at the last 2 years of any type of fluctuate, just the shifts within talent across all industries, it's. I think that's true even outside of transactions right now. Just there are all kinds of shifting and different conversations that we're having to try to attract and retain the best talent possible. But I'm pleased that in as a whole that you've been happy with the buyer and the culture that you've kind of joined up with. So that's exciting.
Yeah, they're good people, certainly.
I really like we're not going to treat you like family because half of the families are dysfunctional, which is so true. That's good advice. That's very good advice. Well, let's talk about the future, and it may be still a little bit early, but I'm always interested because we kind of we turn one page of the book and we kind of begin a new chapter of something new of lots of possibilities. So, what do you see out ahead? Of course, you're still doing some support for Titan transfer, but what do you see out ahead for yourself in the coming years?
Well, I wish I knew. I feel a little bit young to retire, certainly financially. Yeah, need to do something for a few more years, but again, I rest a lot easier in a snowstorm. I still care for those drivers. I worry about their safety, but I'm not going to be the one out there on a Saturday morning, scraping trailer top snow and helping the shop. My immediate goal is just to kind of maybe take a little bit better care of myself, enjoy life a little bit, maybe be a little bit more pleasant to be around for the family. Um, but I'm still kind of figuring that out, to be honest, Spencer.
Well, I think that is exactly where you need to be. And I had a pastor one time that was in a transition career wise, and he shared that like until you kind of let go of whatever it is that you're doing right now, it's very difficult to see what the next thing is. And so I think that my encouragement to you and to other folks that are kind of in that same place is that sometimes you do have to kind of walk out on faith a little bit to do what you know is right for your family, for your people, while also recognizing that the next thing isn't 100% clear.
Certainly.
And so I found that to be very encouraging, and I hope that is encouraging to you as well.
I was on Amazon yesterday looking at Halftime, the book you recommended. I saw on your blog. I think that might be my next read.
Well, I encourage that because there's a lot of wisdom within that book for folks that are in that transition period. And it's also, I think, kind of invigorating when you start talking about impact and you start talking about the things that you now have access to do. Being a little bit more removed away from the operational of the business, having some more capital to go deploy for whatever purposes you see fit. It's an exciting time. So I guess one of my questions, and this is a little bit it's self-promotion, but from your experience standpoint, for those that may be considering Tenney Group, what would be one or two things that you experienced that you would say, hey, these are the things that you need to know about Tenney Group?
I would mirror. You guys did everything you said you would. One of the things I watched your video when I was learning a little bit about Tenney before I even reached out to you, and I think your message was we'll leave you in a better place after the transaction, regardless of the success in the sale. And I've truly felt that. I did some due diligence, talked to some folks. Again, the KSM folks spoke very highly of you. So just integrity of your team. Everyone did what they said they would do. So I had nothing negative at all to say.
Well, I really appreciate you just being willing to share that with our network here. So anything else that you would share with folks that let me ask you this. What advice would you give to future buyers that might be looking at deals that have kind of in that 100 to 125 truck fleet? What advice would you give them as far as their efforts to grow through acquisition?
It's a good, fair question. We were fortunate, and I think one thing, again, I took it for granted. My father always said you can tell a lot about a business just walking through and seeing if the people are happy and how clean the office is and so forth. But one thing the chairman of the buyer said is he said, I drove through your lot. The trucks were parked in a neat and orderly fashion. The shop was tidy. Parts were on the shelf in an organized fashion. that spoke a lot. But again, their message at the start was, "Here's the spirit of the deal, and if we want it to work for both parties." And I think they truly meant that. And from maintaining the equipment to having fuel in the tanks, we didn't nickel and dime them, and they didn't nickel and dime me. So it was amicable. The one thing I might have thought differently about was maybe perhaps the timing. We did the transition in November 1st, and with the holidays around the corner, if I could do over, would I maybe waited for the first year? I'm not sure. But little things like, prepaid insurances and benefit renewal and plates, when your licenses renew. I don't think there's any perfect time for the sale from that perspective, because every state's different, and everybody's, benefits. Nobody has that perfect cycle. So ours worked out in the end. I was happy with it. Again, the biggest disappointment on my part was the couple of employees we lost.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think that's what we want to do here. We want to provide some clear, and helpful color for what people are walking into. And I think that the more that they understand some of the nuances, just the better experience they're going to have. And so, listen, Matt, I really appreciate you taking the time. We're here for you in the next chapter. Anything that we can do for you, let us know. But with that, we're going to wrap it up there with the hot seat. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.